They called me the family babysitter, smiling like it was a joke. But the laughter stuck to my skin like tar. At the last reunion, my father introduced me to my cousins, as if my 35 years of work, my degrees, my late nights building something meaningful didn't exist. That moment went live. Hundreds watched, thousands laughed. What they didn't know was that I had been holding a secret. In 3 weeks, the same people who dismissed me would watch me stand on a stage, every word slicing through years of silence. And this time, I wouldn't be invisible. The air smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey, the kind of scent that seemed to promise comfort. Outside, maple leaves blazed gold and red against the crisp autumn sky. I stood in the kitchen, my hands moving automatically, pouring apple cider into little plastic cups for my nieces and nephews, while the hum of voices filled the house. The big table in the dining room gleamed under the chandelier, covered with steaming dishes, each one wrapped in the kind of care my family only showed for food, never for feelings. From where I stood, I could see my father in the living room. His arm was draped over my brother's shoulder, his voice booming with pride as he recounted the latest milestone in my brother's construction company. Another 7-figure contract, a fleet of new trucks, employees who treated him like family. The cousins leaned in, hanging on his words. I tried to focus on the cider. Then my father's gaze swept the room, catching mine for the briefest second before turning to the cluster of relatives on the couch. "And this," he said, his voice lighter now, the tone shifting to something almost mocking, "this is the babysitter for all these little monsters." Laughter rolled through the room like a wave. I froze, the pitcher still in my hands. A few cousins glanced at me, some with pity, others with the amused detachment of people watching a scene they didn't want to interrupt. I smiled, thin, brittle, and set the pitcher down, wiping my palms on a dish towel that suddenly felt too small. As I leaned over to pick up a cup, I felt a presence at my side. My cousin Marissa, older by 2 years and always with an expression like she knew more than she should, bent slightly toward me. "You still haven't told them, have you?" she murmured, her breath warm against my ear. I straightened slowly. "Told them what?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the cups. Her lips twitched, but she didn't answer. She drifted away, her wine glass catching the light as she rejoined the crowd. I watched her for a moment, my stomach knotting. Told them what? I thought. What exactly did she mean? The night wore on, and eventually we all moved into the dining room. Plates clinked, silverware scraped against porcelain, and conversation buzzed in overlapping threads. I sat 2 seats down from my father, trying to disappear into the noise. Halfway through the meal, he launched into a familiar story. "Remember when Rachel quit her nice office job?" he began, waving his fork like a conductor's baton. "She just decided she was going to wander the world, find herself." His voice stretched the words like taffy, sweetened just enough to be poisonous. The table erupted in laughter, the kind that made your cheeks burn even when you tried to pretend you were in on the joke. I pushed a bite of stuffing around my plate, willing my face to stay neutral. My brother grinned at me from across the table, the same grin he wore when we were kids, and he'd beaten me at something our parents pretended was a fair match. Somewhere to my left, a phone clicked. I didn't think much of it until later, when my younger cousin's voice rang out. "I'm posting this. It's gold." I caught the words, family roast, before the sound of forks and conversation drowned her out again. By the time dessert was served, I had almost convinced myself to let it go. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd heard worse from them. I'd survived worse. It wasn't until the next morning, coffee in hand, that I saw the TikTok. The video opened with my father's smirking face, his voice booming about my so-called journey to find meaning. Laughter echoed behind him, my own figure just visible in the background, half hidden by the kitchen doorway. The caption read, "Family Roast of the Century, 100,000 views overnight." The comments were a mix of strangers amused by the roast, and others debating whether it was cruel or just playful. I scrolled past the predictable jabs. She probably still lives at home. Some people just can't handle jokes, until my eyes snagged on one that made my breath catch. Just wait until they find out. No name, no profile picture, just those words. I stared at them for a long time, the cursor blinking on my screen like it was keeping time with my heartbeat. Find out what? The thought lodged itself in my mind and wouldn't leave. 2 days later, a notification pinged on my phone. I opened it without thinking, expecting another meaningless family meme. Instead, it was a message from my cousin Anna. "You've been removed from estate planning Miller family group chat." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. No explanation, no warning, just gone. That chat had been buzzing for weeks about dividing my grandparents' property. I had stayed silent not because I didn't care, but because I didn't trust myself to keep my tone civil. Now, I wasn't even allowed to read their words. That evening, during another family get-together at my parents' house, my Aunt Helen approached me. She had that pinched expression she wore when she wanted to appear kind, but couldn't quite hide her condescension. "Here, honey," she said, pressing a folded bill into my hand like she was passing along contraband. I unfolded it, a crisp $100 note. Just a little something to help with your classes for the kids or whatever you're doing these days. I forced a smile, tucking it into my pocket to avoid a scene, but the weight of it burned. She didn't know, or maybe she did, that years ago she'd been a struggling single mom, and an anonymous scholarship had paid her tuition for night school. That scholarship had come from me. I'd never told anyone. The irony tasted bitter. I slipped out to the porch for air, wrapping my sweater tighter against the November chill. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from my friend Leah. I just saw something, thought you should know. Attached was an audio file. I hesitated before pressing play. My brother's voice filled my ear, muffled but clear enough to slice through me. "Rachel just wants attention. She's nothing special, never has been." A male voice, one of his friends maybe, laughed in agreement. I didn't realize my hands were shaking until I nearly dropped the phone. I texted Leah, "Where did you get this?" Her reply was quick. "One of your cousins sent it to me by mistake. Thought I was another Leah." I leaned against the porch railing, my breath fogging the cold air. A knot formed in my stomach, tightening with every second. When I walked back inside, the noise hit me like a wall. My relatives were scattered across the living room, plates balanced on their knees, wine glasses clinking. I kept my head down, moving toward the kitchen. That's when Uncle Don, cheeks flushed from drink, stopped me with a hand on my arm. "You know," he said, lowering his voice in what he probably thought was discretion, "your dad, he told us last year at Thanksgiving that you were his biggest disappointment. Said he'd done everything for you and you just... He trailed off, shaking his head. I don't know, kid. Maybe prove him wrong, huh? I managed a nod before slipping away. My feet carried me down the hallway toward the coat closet, where I could hide for a moment. Inside the dim space, surrounded by the faint scent of mothballs and winter wool, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. A memory surfaced, unbidden. I was 9 years old, standing in the school auditorium with a participation ribbon clutched in my fist. I'd just lost the spelling bee in the final round. My father had been waiting outside the double doors. When he saw me, he scooped me up, ribbon and all, and said, "You were the best one up there. Don't let anyone tell you different." I'd believed him. For years I'd believed that no matter what anyone else thought, he saw me. The echo of that memory clashed violently with the words I'd just heard. His, my brother's, the unspoken judgment in every glance across the dinner table. I stayed in that closet longer than I meant to, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses. The air felt heavy, like the house itself was pressing in on me. Finally, I stepped out, moving quickly toward the back door. I didn't bother saying goodbye. The cold night air slapped my face as I walked to my car, my pulse still hammering. Halfway home, at a red light, I opened the audio file again and played it on repeat. My brother's voice dripped with the same smugness my father's had carried for years. Nothing special, never has been. The words dug in, but beneath the sting, something else was beginning to form. A heat low in my chest, rising slowly, steadily. I didn't know it yet, but this was the moment the ground beneath my family's careful image began to crack. Grandma's 80th birthday was supposed to be a celebration. The community hall was strung with silver and gold balloons, long tables draped in linen, the air thick with the smell of frosted cake and slow-cooked roast. I arrived late, hoping to slip in unnoticed. My father was already at the centre of it all, a microphone in his hand, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Family is everything," he said, beaming at the audience. "We take care of each other." The applause was warm, affectionate, the kind of sound you could almost believe in until he turned his head toward me. "And if anyone needs a babysitter," he added, grinning, "you can always call Rachel." The room erupted in laughter, the kind that was sharper than it sounded. I stood near the dessert table, my hands tightening around the strap of my bag. My face felt hot, but my feet wouldn't move. What I didn't realize in that moment was that Uncle Don's wife had set up a live stream on the Miller family Facebook group. Over 300 people were watching from their homes, their phones, their offices, people who hadn't spoken to me in years. Somewhere among them, in the scrolling list of viewers, was a local journalist who had once emailed me about a possible TEDx talk. I'd ignored it back then, convinced I had nothing worth saying. The laughter on the live stream didn't just echo in the room, it travelled, digital and instant, across the miles. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the stainless steel cake knife. Frozen smile. Glassy eyes. Then, as my father handed the mic to my brother for another round of jokes, I noticed a figure at the back of the room. He wasn't laughing. He was holding up his phone, not toward the stage, but toward me. The red recording light blinked steadily. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before he turned away, angling his phone to capture more of my expression. It wasn't support, it was extraction, like he was collecting a moment to use later. I forced myself to stay until Grandma blew out her candles. As the crowd pressed in around her, I slipped out into the hallway, the noise fading behind me. That night, back in my apartment, I curled up on the couch with my laptop. Against my better judgment, I pulled up the live stream. The comments poured down the side of the video like a waterfall. Classic dad joke. Poor Rachel, she's still at it. Guess she never grew up. And then one that made me pause. Total failure. Some people just can't get it together. The words sat there, black against white, more final than they had any right to be. I closed the laptop, set it aside, and stared at the darkened TV screen. The idea of deleting every social media account I had, disappearing entirely, pulled at me like a tide. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was nothing. I picked up my phone, opened Instagram, hovered over the deactivate option. My finger trembled above it. That's when the notification came through. A direct message. No name, no profile picture, just the default silhouette. They won't be laughing for long. Get ready. I read it twice, 3 times. My pulse quickened, a strange mix of fear and curiosity crawling up my spine. Who was this? What did they mean? I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. I set the phone down and pressed my palms to my eyes. My apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, but in my head the echoes of laughter from earlier still rang. The weight of years of being the family punchline pressed heavy on my chest. And yet, somewhere under that heaviness, a spark flickered, faint but stubborn. I didn't know what the message meant. I didn't know if it was a threat or a promise. But I knew one thing. Something had shifted tonight. The cracks were widening, and for the first time in years, I wanted to see what might break through. I didn't open the email at first. It sat in my inbox for weeks, buried under newsletters and promotional spam. Its subject line polite but persistent. Invitation to speak at TEDx. Opportunity for your story. I'd seen it before, skimmed the first few lines and closed it. Back then, the idea felt absurd. What could I possibly say that mattered? But tonight, after the message from the anonymous account, I scrolled until I found it again. My cursor hovered over the subject line. I clicked. The invitation was clear. A 15-minute talk on transformation, resilience, and the human spirit. My name had been suggested by a journalist, probably the same one who'd been watching that humiliating live stream. I read it twice, my chest tightening. This could be it, the chance to say everything I'd swallowed for years, not with shouting, not with insults, but with precision, with truth. I leaned back, staring at the blinking cursor in the reply window. I didn't type yes. Instead, my fingers moved to something else entirely. Thank you for the invitation. I accept, but I intend to tell the truth, my truth. If that's a problem, let me know now. I hit send before I could overthink it. A slow smile spread across my face, the kind I hadn't felt in years. Sharp at the edges, dangerous in its certainty. The next day, I started planning. First, I bought a stack of index cards and wrote single words on each. Humiliation, silence, worth, choice, voice. Then I began stitching them together, building a story that moved like a tide, pulling the audience under, then lifting them to air. I didn't name my family, but I painted them in strokes so vivid, no one who knew us would fail to recognize the picture. I hired a speaking coach, a woman with a razor eye for posture and tone. "Don't flinch when you tell the hard parts," she said, circling me like a hawk during rehearsal. "Make them feel the weight before you let them feel the lift." I practiced for hours each day, my voice steadying, my spine lengthening. The more I spoke the words out loud, the less they belonged to my pain and the more they belonged to my power. Then came the stylist. I told her I wanted something that felt like armour without looking like it. We settled on a tailored white suit, clean, strong, impossible to miss under the stage lights. A week into my preparation, I received a message from a number I didn't recognise. "This is Emma. I'm the one who posted that TikTok, the roast video." I almost didn't reply, but curiosity won. "Why are you texting me?" Her next message was immediate. "I'm sorry, I didn't think it would blow up like that. I've been watching you. Your posts. I think people need to hear the real story. Can I film your rehearsals?" I hesitated. It could be another setup, another way to turn me into a punchline. But something in her tone, hesitant, almost pleading, made me pause. "If you film, it's my story, my rules," I typed back. "No leaks until after the talk." "Of course," she replied. I think it's time they see the truth." Emma showed up the next day with a camera that looked older than she was, its lens worn but still sharp. She filmed in silence while I rehearsed, capturing the moments between takes, the deep breaths, the clenched fists, the flicker in my eyes when I spoke certain lines. I didn't ask what she planned to do with the footage. 2 days later, during a break, my phone buzzed with a notification from TikTok. An unfamiliar account, no name, just a black and white profile picture, had posted a 30-second clip of me on stage in a rehearsal space, delivering a line about refusing to let anyone define your worth. The caption read, "She's not who they say she is." I watched the views climb in real time, 10,000, 20, 30, comments flooded in, "This is powerful, who is she?" Following for more. Emma swore she hadn't posted it. "Maybe someone at the venue?" she suggested, but her voice carried the slightest tremor. By the end of the week, the anonymous account had posted 3 more clips, each one sharper, more defiant. The follower count exploded past 50,000. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt something else. Momentum. For the first time, the narrative was slipping from my family's grip, and I wasn't going to let them take it back. The day of the TEDx talk dawned cold and bright, the kind of morning where the light feels sharper, like it's been honed for a purpose. I slipped into the white suit, its fabric cool against my skin, and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection met my gaze steadily, without flinching. Backstage, the muffled murmur of the audience rose and fell. Stagehands moved like shadows, their voices low and urgent. My name was announced, and I stepped into the blinding lights. The stage felt both impossibly large and intimately close, the red circle beneath my feet, a target I intended to hit dead center. I looked out at the sea of faces, but in my mind I saw others, the ones who had laughed, who had dismissed me. I took a breath. My father once introduced me to my cousins as the family babysitter, I began, my voice even. It wasn't a joke I agreed to. It wasn't even close to the truth. But it was a role I'd been assigned long before. I was old enough to understand the rules of our family. The words landed heavy, and I let the silence stretch before moving on. As I spoke, the scene shifted miles away. In my parents' living room, the TV flickered to life. My mother sat stiffly on the couch, my father mid-bite with a forkful of roast in his hand. My brother lounged in an armchair, phone in his lap. On the screen my image appeared, standing in that red circle dressed in white, speaking to a packed theatre. The fork clattered against the plate. No one moved. Back on stage, I wove the story. The years of invisibility, the casual cruelty disguised as humour, the nights lying awake, wondering if I truly was nothing more than a placeholder in my own life. I didn't name names, but the details were sharp enough to cut through any pretense. In the living room, my father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. My brother's eyes narrowed, flicking to the phone in his hands, the screen glowing faintly. I reached the turning point of my talk, the moment when humiliation became resolve. One day, I said, I realised I didn't need to fight for a place in their narrative. I could write my own. Faces in the theatre were rapt, the silence thick enough to feel. Then came the moment I'd kept hidden, the twist I'd saved for last. The final slide appeared on the screen behind me, a photo from decades ago. I was 9 years old, clutching a blue ribbon for winning the spelling bee. My father stood beside me, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, smiling like he believed in me with his whole heart. I turned slightly, letting the audience take it in. There was a time, I said softly, when he saw me, when he believed in me. And that memory is the one I'm choosing to keep. In the theatre, a few people wiped their eyes. In the living room, my mother's lips pressed together. My father sat back slowly, his expression unreadable. My brother looked away. And then in the far corner of the TV broadcast, the camera caught something else. My brother's phone, screen up. Playing silently was a TikTok video, the rehearsal footage of me, posted by that anonymous account. The caption read, "She's telling the truth." The view count ticked higher in real time. In the theatre, I closed my talk with a steady voice. You don't need permission to step out of the roles someone else assigns you. You don't need approval to be worthy. You only need the courage to speak. The applause started small, then swelled until it filled the space, a sound like a tide rushing in. I stood in the centre of it, letting the waves hit me. In that moment, I wasn't the babysitter, the disappointment, or the punchline. I was the author, and the story was mine. The first week after the TEDx talk felt unreal. On Monday morning, the video went live on the official TEDx channel. By Wednesday, it had 1 million views. By Friday, it hit 3 million. Comments poured in from strangers around the world, teachers, single parents, young women who said they saw themselves in my story. I sat in my apartment, laptop balanced on my knees, scrolling through messages. Some wrote long paragraphs about the courage it took to speak publicly. Others simply said, "Thank you for saying it out loud." Each one felt like a small stone laid into a new foundation I hadn't dared to imagine before. By the second week, invitations began to arrive. A national morning show wanted me for a live interview. A popular podcast host emailed asking me to be their next guest. A literary agent reached out, suggesting a book deal about the journey from invisibility to voice. I said yes to all of them. One night, as I was drafting chapter notes for the book proposal, a direct message appeared on Instagram. The profile picture was a cartoon cat wearing sunglasses, the name just 3 letters, MJ. It was me, the message read. I typed back before I could think, "Who are you?" The comment, they replied, the one on the TikTok video. "Just wait until they find out." That was me. I froze, remembering the first time I saw those words. Why? I asked. A pause then, because I knew what you were about to do. I've been following you for years, quietly. You probably don't remember me. I'm your cousin's daughter, Mia. I was 12 when you helped me with my school speech. No one in the family cared. You did. I sat back, heart thudding. Memories surfaced. A shy girl with dark braids, clutching note cards, her voice trembling as we practiced in the corner during a barbecue. I wanted people to see the real you, she continued. So I sent the rehearsal clips to someone I trusted. We made the TikTok account together. I didn't think it would blow up like that, but I'm glad it did. For a moment, I couldn't type anything. Finally, I wrote, "You changed everything." She replied with a single heart emoji, and that was the last message. But the knowledge of it, the fact that one small, quiet voice had helped amplify mine, settled deep in my chest like an ember. By the third week, my calendar was full. I was travelling more than I had in years, speaking at conferences, guesting on panels. Each time I stood on stage, I felt a little steadier, like the suit of armour I'd put on for the TEDx talk had become part of me. When the book deal was finalised, I knew exactly what I wanted to do first. The advance was more than I'd ever made in a single paycheck. I took a portion of it and set up a scholarship fund for girls who'd been dismissed, underestimated, or sidelined by the very people who should have championed them. I named it the Chosen Voice Fund. The name was deliberate, a reminder that worth isn't given by others, it's claimed by yourself. The day of the launch, I stood in a small auditorium, the fund's name projected behind me in bold letters. The audience was filled with young women, some barely teenagers, others starting their first jobs, all of them leaning forward as I spoke. I told them about fear, about the weight of silence, about how speaking once had felt like trying to push through stone. I told them they didn't need to wait for permission. When the event ended, a line formed. One girl, no older than 15, pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "This is my application," she whispered. "I didn't think I could, but I'm going to try." That night, in a quiet hotel room, I unfolded her letter and felt the same swell of determination I'd carried onto that TEDx stage. This was the work. This was the point. Weeks later, I found myself under stage lights again, this time for a televised interview. The host asked thoughtful questions about resilience and forgiveness. We talked about the book, the scholarship, the response from strangers. Then, near the end, she leaned forward. "Rachel," she said, "if your family is watching this right now, is there anything you'd like to say to them?" The studio fell into a hush. The cameras shifted, their lenses narrowing in. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing in from all sides. I thought of my father's arm around me at 9 years old, of the years in between, of the fork clattering against the plate when my face filled their TV screen. I thought of the anonymous comment, the viral videos, the scholarship fund. I thought of Mia and her quiet defiance. I looked straight into the camera. The light was bright, the audience silent, the seconds stretching. And then fade to black.